everyone. I skipped December and didn't do a video, but I'm kind of joining December and January. If you're ready to get caught up, now's a good time to get started on block of the month for your fall gatherings. So this is the December block, and then the other block is another pieced one. So this is your January. I'm going to show you some half square triangle techniques, and we're going to go and also do some flying geese techniques. So I'm going to say these things for you guys so that you can have more accurate blocks and it's easier to sew together. Also note, these fabrics aren't the exact ones from your kits because I've got this giant pile of scraps that I'm working with. Both of these months are going to have squares that are cut from corner to corner to make your half square triangles. So you'll take those like pieces and sew them together. But these are all cut in 1/8 increments. So if you've got a ruler and you're cutting squares without 1/8 markings, you need to check it and get a ruler that has 1/8 inch markings for those 3/8, 7/8 pieces. So I've sewn my pieces together and I'm using kind of a scant 1/4 inch seam, and I'm gonna press these open and you'll see why in the next clip. So when you sew half square triangles in this manner and then press and open, know when you're sewing those that this edge here was stretchy and on the bias. So you can get some stretch and warp in this block. So what we need to do is square that up and make sure it's perfect for our block. So on these patterns, it doesn't give you this step. This is a step for experienced quilters to know, and so that's why I'm sharing it with you. So you can see that this half square triangle, I finished it, but you can see underneath my ruler that it's not perfect. So squaring this up and making it perfect is so important. So I know what size it needs to be because in my pattern instructions, anytime I have a square that's not cut apart, it's pretty much going to be the same size. So if you think about sewing this into your block without squaring it up, you're going to have like a little bit bigger or smaller in some areas, and that's when your blocks can get stretchy and warped. So I've cut these 2 edges, and now I'm going to turn my block, and I'm using this ruler that has that diagonal line, so I can line that diagonal up with the diagonal of my block, scooch in that 2.5 inch line, and then I'm going to cut these other 2 sizes. And you're going to square up all of your half square triangles with this method depending on what size they need to be, which might take a little detective work. This particular one here, the block has solid squares that are 3 inches, so I know that this needs to be 3 inches also. If for some reason on your block you don't have enough fabric to trim, it's too small, that means you need to be taking a smaller seam so it's a little bit bigger than it needs to be to square it up. The other technique for this month is sewing flying geese units. So this is where you're going to have your connector squares, and you want to make sure you're positioning them the way the pattern shows in their diagrams, and you'll always sew 1 square on at a time. So you'll stitch just a little bit beyond the line, press that. Always try to press the seams open if you can, but if it seems difficult, then don't worry about that. So I'm going to stitch a little bit just beyond the line. That gives me room to press that, and then trim, and then I'll be ready for the next step. So I've sewn and trimmed this one, and you can see that I'm trimming off that excess there, and then this will be pressed. And you can press these open, so you can just simply press that open back here, and that reduces some of that bulk for you. So after that is pressed, after it's trimmed, then you've got your other block, and that's going to get positioned the next step. So you have to do one side before you can do the other. Same technique. Now you can square up these units too. Generally, this doesn't happen, but you can see here I got a little weirdness there in the corner. It happens. And so when you square up a flying geese unit, you always need to have 1/4 inch from that point to the outside edge to make sure that you have enough, because that's going to be in your seam allowance. You don't want to sew your points off. So you can see this under my ruler here. I have just a tad bit that I could square up, and it just ended up being just a little bit wonky. So I'll just trim what I can to make sure that that's going to be easier to sew in. So I've trimmed off just a little bit on one side, and you can see here where my 2.5 is. I've got 1/4 inch to my point, and you can see here just a little bit, just shreds. But this is gonna, a little bit extra work is going to make piecing those last pieces together a lot easier. Well, I hope you have fun and happy sewing on sewing your blocks from the January kit that's coming out. And then also, if you were doing a lot of stuff in December and you didn't get to your block, now's a good time to just get them both out and work on those.